They tell you Hera was jealous, which is a bit like saying the sea is wet. Technically true, entirely unhelpful. Human beings have an extraordinary talent for shrinking complicated women into simple stories. It makes history easier to remember. It rarely makes it more accurate. Ask almost anyone about Hera, and you'll hear the same answer: Zeus's wife. Queen of the gods, jealous, vindictive, forever chasing her husband's lovers across the Greek world. It's a tidy story, convenient, and I think deeply misleading, because here's the part that has always bothered me. Jealous wives don't usually command creatures with 100 eyes. They don't bargain with kings. They don't preside over some of the oldest sanctuaries in Greece. And they most certainly do not carry scepters. So either Hera was the most unusually equipped jealous wife in history, or we've misunderstood something important. I suspect it's the second one. Let's begin with poor Io. History remembers her as one of Zeus's lovers. History, as usual, has a habit of introducing women by whichever man caused them the most trouble. But Io matters here for a different reason. She became the subject of one of the strangest acts of surveillance in Greek mythology. Hera assigned Argus Panoptes to watch her. If you've never heard of Argus before, don't worry. Nobody forgets him twice. He had 100 eyes. They never all closed at once. While some slept, the others watched. Imagine trying to escape something that never truly blinked. No private moment, no unseen movement, no room to disappear. We often congratulate ourselves on inventing constant surveillance. Cameras, satellites, algorithms. The Greeks imagined it with eyes. Now it would be comforting to dismiss all this as jealousy. People often do. The trouble is, jealousy rarely looks this organized. It flares, it lashes out, it burns itself out. Hera's punishments had a pattern. Anyone can lose their temper once. Patterns deserve our attention. Take Callisto, another woman Zeus desired. Another woman whose life collided with Hera's. By the end of the story, Callisto has lost almost everything that made her recognizable. She is transformed into a bear, not simply punished, not merely exiled. She can still think, still remember, but she can no longer speak to the people who once knew her. Then there was Semele. She wasn't struck down by Hera's own hand. That would have been too direct. Hera persuaded her instead, a seed of doubt. If Zeus truly loves you, ask him to reveal himself. It sounds harmless, until you remember that mortals cannot survive the full presence of a god. And Zeus kept his promise. How benevolent of him. Take Leto. Pregnant with Apollo and Artemis, she searches for somewhere, anywhere, to give birth. But Hera makes the world itself feel closed to her. No city, no kingdom, no ordinary patch of earth will take her in. Eventually, a floating island called Delos offers refuge. It belongs to no one, which in this case means Hera cannot shut it out. And then comes Heracles. Before he can even speak, Hera sends serpents to his cradle. Years later, when his strength has made him famous, she strikes again, this time with madness, long enough to destroy the people he loves most. That is what makes Hera's punishments so unsettling. They're rarely immediate. They do not simply end a life. They reshape it. Watch constantly, punish selectively, make the consequences impossible to ignore. This pattern should feel familiar. If you're thinking of Big Brother, good, so was I. George Orwell's 1984 makes the resemblance hard to ignore. Both stories arrive at the same uncomfortable conclusion. You do not control people by hurting everyone. You control them by making everyone imagine what might happen if you chose to. But if Hera truly wielded power like this, power that watched, remembered, and made examples of those who crossed it, then why do we remember her as little more than an angry wife? Because here's the curious thing. The myths themselves keep giving her things angry wives don't usually possess. And that's where I realized the myths weren't enough. Myths tell us how people imagined their gods. Worship tells us how they actually treated them. The two are not always the same. Walter Burkert explains this worship in detail. Hera's sanctuaries are among the oldest and most important in the Greek world. At Samos stood one of the earliest monumental temples in Greece. At Argos, Hera was a central power, not a side character. Before marble statues became the norm, she was worshipped through older forms. A wooden plank at Samos, a sacred pillar at Argos. They belong to a world so ancient it almost disappears behind the myths that came later. You don't build some of the oldest sanctuaries in your civilization for a goddess whose defining quality is marital resentment. Jennifer Larson draws attention to Hera's titles, the names people actually used when they prayed to her. One of them is Telea, the complete one, the fulfilled one. It sounds like sovereignty and nothing like insecurity. And then there is Paris. When the goddesses offer him their gifts, Aphrodite offers love, Athena offers victory, Hera offers power, kingship, because royal authority belonged to her sphere. You cannot offer what you do not possess. Do we ask the wrong question about Hera? We ask, was she really jealous? Perhaps. The myths certainly give us reason to think she could be. But that question has always struck me as too small. We've spent centuries looking at Hera only through the eyes of a marriage. Perhaps we look through the eyes of a kingdom instead. Because queens rarely think only as wives. They think as guardians of a throne. A wife may fear betrayal. A queen fears legitimacy, succession, authority, order. Zeus's affairs were rarely private indiscretions. They produced heroes, kings, founders of cities, new dynasties. Every child carried the possibility of reshaping the world Hera governed. Have we mistaken the concerns of a queen for the emotions of a spouse? And if we have, then a more interesting question begins to emerge. Why did jealousy become the first thing we remember? Because by now, we've met another Hera, the Hera of ancient sanctuaries, the Hera who offered power, the Hera with the scepter, the Hera whose authority stretched across the Greek world. None of her power disappears. It simply seems to fade into the background. Nothing essential was lost. Our attention simply settled elsewhere. By the time we reach Homer, Hera often becomes something almost comic, not powerless, never powerless, but increasingly defined by quarrels with Zeus. Yet even Homer cannot quite make her small. She remains his sister, his equal by birth, queen of Olympus. The stories pull in one direction. Her symbols keep pulling back. It's much easier to explain powerful people differently than to erase them completely. A conqueror becomes a patriot, a rebel becomes a criminal, a king becomes a tyrant or a hero, depending entirely on who's telling the story. Maybe gods aren't so different. History doesn't always change its facts. Sometimes it changes their meaning. Orwell understood that better than almost anyone. Most people remember 1984 for Big Brother. The surveillance is frightening, yes, and the torture is horrifying. But neither is the book's greatest weapon. Its greatest weapon is memory. Who controls the past, controls the future. It's one of those rare sentences that refuses to grow old. Stories shape memory. Memory shapes reputation. Reputation shapes history. I don't believe Hera disappeared. Forgotten things disappear. We never forgot Hera. Her authority survived. Her worship survived. Her symbols survived. Even her punishments survived. But somewhere along the line, the story we chose to tell about those things changed. A sovereign became, first and foremost, a jealous wife. Perhaps that newer story proved easier to remember. Hera has fascinated me for so long, not because she was kind or fair. She was clearly far from that. Greek gods generally are, but she reminds us that history is rarely made of lies. More often, it's made of emphasis. We shine a light here, leave some corners in shadow, repeat one version often enough, and eventually it becomes the only one anyone remembers. So yes, Hera could be jealous. The myths leave little doubt about that. But if that's the first thing we think of when we hear her name, then I can't help feeling we've overlooked the more interesting woman sitting quietly behind the story. And if you'll forgive one old habit of mine, whenever history insists a person can be explained in a single sentence, I find it worth asking who benefits from such a tidy ending. There's more to every myth. Subscribe to discover it.